Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and other members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. As this committee crafts its budget for fiscal year 2016, there are several priorities that I urge you to consider. First, the Department of Energy Office of Science. Despite the fact that over half of U.S. economic growth since World War II has been driven by science and technology, federal investments in research and development are at a historic low, comprising less than 4% of the federal budget. The region of Illinois that I represent is home to a number of scientific centers, including Fermilab and Argonne National Laboratory. Projects in the pipeline at these institutions hold enormous promise for revitalizing our energy and manufacturing sectors. For example, the Joint Center for Energy Storage Research seeks to discover new ways to store energy that has the potential to transform energy delivery and further cement the U.S.'s position as a leader in renewable energy sources. These vital investments will help the U.S. maintain our competitive advantage as the global leader in science and technology and to grow our economy. So I urge the committee to fully fund the Office of Science at the President's FY16 budget request level of $5.3 billion. Secondly, the detention bed mandate. As Congress debates funding for the Department of Homeland Security, one important issue that's been overlooked is the department's arbitrary detention bed quota, which requires that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement maintain at least 34,000 immigrants in detention every single day. In 2015, we will spend nearly $2 billion on immigrant detention, which amounts to $5.4 million a day, or $159 per day per detainee. This wasteful federal spending continues despite the availability of other proven and cheaper alternatives. So eliminating the detention bed mandate will not only save families the heartache of being torn apart, it will also save taxpayers millions of dollars. Thirdly, heroin and opioid abuse. I would like to call to this committee's attention the epidemic of heroin abuse throughout this country. The number of deaths related to drug overdoses has now overtaken motor vehicle crashes as the leading cause of injury-related deaths in the United States. We must make greater investments in the federal agencies that fight opioid abuse and fund new, promising research programs in opioid addiction. These federal programs investigate everything from heroin vaccines to new, easier-to-administer formulations of naloxone, a prescription medicine that reverses an opioid overdose. In this year's budget request, the President has requested an additional $99 million in new funds to combat opioid epidemic, a tiny number compared to the hundreds of billions that our country spends on the cost of substance addiction every single year. In light of this epidemic, I urge the committee to fully fund federal programs that help prevent and treat opioid addiction, including the new funds requested by the President. Fourth, WRDA. I would like to emphasize the importance of the inland waterway system, which is maintained by the Army Corps of Engineers. In its 2013 report card, the American Society of Civil Engineers issued our waterway infrastructure a D-, noting that more than half of the locks in the system are more than 50 years old. The Brandon Road Lock and Dam on the Des Plaines River, which is part of the inland waterway system that is located in my district, facilitates commerce and will serve as a testing ground for new technologies to prevent the spread of Asian carp and other aquatic nuisance species into the Great Lakes. With these economic and environmental benefits in mind, I urge the committee to fully fund the Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works program. And fifth and finally, I'd like to bring up the payer-state issue. This final issue I'd like to raise is that Illinois is one of several states that sends far more money in taxes to the federal government than what it gets back, to the tune, in Illinois' case, of over $20 billion every year. This represents an enormous financial drag on the citizens of Illinois, corresponding to roughly $2,000 per person in a typical year. Illinois is thus put at a tremendous competitive disadvantage, since the federal shortfall must eventually show up as higher state taxes or underinvestment in infrastructure and education. So as you craft your budget, I urge you to at least document how unlevel the playing field has become for states like Illinois by producing an analysis that documents this unjustified transfer of wealth between states. Well, thank you all.